Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jeremy, leading these Monday night sessions this month. This is number 4 of 5. So for anyone who hasn't been to these sessions before, we do some meditation, and I talk a bit about some Buddhist practices and Buddhist ideas, and then we can have some lively debate and discussion about those ideas. Feel free to ask any questions. So as I always say, the Buddha encouraged people to test his ideas thoroughly before accepting them. So you're encouraged to be skeptical and test these ideas thoroughly. And so feel free to ask any questions or raise any objections. There's nothing that's out of bounds. So the theme that we've been talking about this month is this idea in one of the Buddhist ideas that so we have these states of mind which cause us problems, which we refer to as afflictive mental states. So an example of that would be something like anger or stress, something that disturbs your mind, makes you feel unhappy, agitated, and also can cause you to harm others. And that these problematic states of mind are arising and causing us problems due to some mistaken understanding of how things are, as in we're not understanding the situation clearly. There's like a gap between how it appears to us and how it actually is. So that's the idea. So that's what we're investigating, this idea. And the Dalai Lama often makes this comment that this actually gives us cause for a lot of optimism and encouragement, because if we can identify the way that the mind is being deceived or tricked by these deceptive appearances, then we can remove the cause for these afflictive states of mind, like stress and anxiety, depression, etc. The things that are causing us problems. So that's what we're investigating. Anyway, before we get into that, we'll do some meditation. We've got some nice crickets, I think they are, accompanying us tonight. I was trying to work out what they were. They don't sound like cicadas, do they? Very nice. Thank you, crickets. So the meditation, firstly, what is meditation? Can anyone answer? So the answer I always give is meditation means familiarizing your mind with a positive mental state. So that's what we're trying to do. So it's not just emptying your mind, it's actually familiarizing your mind with a positive mental object or a positive mental state. So for example, tonight we'll be focusing on this state of mind of compassion, among other things. So that would be a positive state of mind. But just being able to concentrate and focus your mind on one object, even if it's a neutral object like the breath, is, as you'll experience, I think, has the effect of calming your mind. So that's interesting. Just by focusing your mind on one thing, a neutral thing, like your breath, your mind will become peaceful. So that's something we have to experiment and check to see whether that's true. But if that's true, then that's quite a revelation, because it means that we don't need anything else to feel peaceful. All we need is our mind and our breath. So no matter where you are, if you can still your mind and focus on one thing, then you'll feel peaceful. That's all you need. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? So to do this, what we need is two mental faculties. One is called mindfulness in this context. And mindfulness means remembering the object that you have chosen to focus on. So in a moment we'll just focus on the breath, so that's the chosen object. And introspection, which is observing to see whether your mind has wandered away, which it tends to do, as we know. So this is called the monkey mind, that wants to keep busy doing things all the time. So we're giving the monkey mind a break, saying, monkey mind, you can just stop for the next few minutes, have a break, and just rest on the object of focus. So firstly, bring your attention just to your body. See how your body's feeling. Relax your body. Sit in a posture which helps you to concentrate, generally with your back straight and your eyes slightly open. And then when you breathe out, feel that you're expelling all the concerns of the day, all the things that you've been busy with, things that have been stressing you or worrying you. Just let them out, let go of them. Make a decision to not worry about them for the next hour. Then bring your attention to your breath. So we're focusing just on the breath without letting the mind wander to any other object. So you place your mind on the breath, just observe it moving in and out through your nostrils if you can. Can help to focus just on the tip, on the point under the tip of your nose, on the sensation of the breath moving in and out past that point. So we're just focusing our mind on that, not letting it wander to anything else. So it's like resting your mind on that object, but also being alert to it wandering off. So as soon as it starts to wander, you just bring it back to that point. So now that we have some degree of concentration, we use that to focus on the meditation called the conventional nature of the mind, which we've been doing for the past few weeks. So in this meditation, you visualize your mind as being like the clear sky, so clear and vast, also silent, still, and you imagine that any thoughts or things appearing to the mind are like the clouds arising in the mind. So there's all different kinds of clouds arising, passing through the mind. So they're impermanent, they come and go. We're focusing particularly on the sky part of the mind. So this is called clear and knowing. So it's clear as in that it is unobstructed. It allows thoughts to arise within it, like clouds in the sky. And it's knowing, meaning that it knows the objects that arise in the mind, like the breath, or like a memory, or like a sound. So we're focusing on that clear and knowing nature. That's like the substrate behind or within which the thoughts arise, the space. So again, we're using mindfulness and introspection to keep our mind focused on that clear and knowing nature of the mind. So this whole process is relaxed and easy, doesn't require any force, just requires some attention and alertness. If your mind gets busy thinking about something, getting distracted, you can think of that distraction as just being like the cloud passing through the sky, and then you just let it go, as you would just watching a cloud pass through the sky, and return your focus to the clear and knowing nature. So if you think, for example, about the sound of the crickets, then they're like one of the clouds passing through the sky. So that's an appearance to the mind. So it's an object of mind, which is like the clouds, and it's appearing to the clear and knowing nature. So we're trying to identify this clear and knowing nature as separate from the mental objects which arise within the mind. Okay, thank you. Just relax your concentration. Okay, how did you go with that? Is it getting easier, that meditation? Yes, question?
I think your voice is great.
Thank you. The crickets were good. Very nice. Like little flutes. So, nobody have any comments? Questions? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, good question. There's actually a bit of a debate amongst different Buddhist schools about that. I've read texts by this teacher, Lama Tsongkhapa, the one in the middle. He says that you need to choose an internal object, as in something within the mind. So, and the reason he says that because the idea is that you're trying to withdraw the mind inwards. So he's saying that if you focus on something external, like like a sound or like, a candle flame or something like that, that it's actually drawing your mind out. So I think that's something, we can experiment with. And I think at sometimes, maybe it could be useful depending on our state of mind. For example, I really enjoy sometimes doing walking meditation, where you just focus on the feeling of your feet on the ground or just on the... and that's an external object, but it does have the benefit of calming your mind, I think. So, it's up to you. You can sort of experiment. But I think for advanced concentration, that maybe we do need to use an internal object. So the goal with concentration meditation is to develop what's called single-pointed concentration, where you can focus your mind on one thing for as long as you want to. It could be hours or apparently days or, for advanced meditators. So, that's the objective. But that's only a tool. We're not so concentration is just a tool that we use for introspection, for analysing what's going on in the mind. So, as we're saying with our theme this month, we're trying to identify things that are deceptive, that are deceiving our mind. So having concentration to analyse those things is very useful. Much harder if your mind's sort of wandering around. So, as I've been saying, I think that's a useful, that meditation on the conventional nature of the mind is a useful reminder of the fact that our minds do have this kind of still clarity behind all the busy thoughts. I think that's a reminder. And sometimes I think the mind can feel like the sky is completely full of dark, stormy clouds with hardly any sky. But even in that state, there's this kind of, behind all that, there's this clear knowing. Conventional nature is the idea. So you sort of try to identify that and focus on that in that meditation, as opposed to focusing on all the things that are going on in your mind, which we tend to do. And that is also a good, I think, analogy or reminder of, in Buddhism there's this idea called Buddha nature. I think in Sanskrit it's Tathagata Garbha. So the idea is that we all have this potential to be enlightened, as in like infinite sort of potential for our minds to develop. So again, that's something that we need to investigate to see whether we agree with that. But as I've been saying, we can see that our mind, it's possible to develop, for example, concentration. We can see that through practice our minds can develop concentration and we can focus more easily, whereas when we first started it was much more difficult to sit still for even a minute. Through practice you find your mind becomes more comfortable just sitting still. So we can see that it's possible to develop these qualities in our mind. So the idea is that we have this potential to develop those, sort of almost limitlessly. And I think there's actually a good... there's a Buddhist gesture you might see when Buddhists greet teachers, for example. They hold their hands like this, and apparently this having your thumbs inside your hand like this represents what's called a wish-fulfilling jewel. So this is an idea, I think maybe a mythological jewel in maybe ancient Indian culture. It was sort of like when you touch it, you make a wish and it'll come true. So it's meant to be an analogy for our own Buddha potential. And so when you greet someone like that, you're acknowledging their Buddha potential, as in, I'm seeing you as a future Buddha or a potential Buddha. And there's a similar idea, I think, in other religions where you sort of identify, like the idea of the divine spark in others, the idea that, I think in Christianity, the idea that all beings are created by God, so they have this divine spark. So it's a bit like that idea, I think. It's a nice idea. So it's recognizing that yourself and others have this huge potential. So that's interesting. Then, as I was saying, we have even though we have this huge potential, we're currently, there's things stopping us from realizing that, from achieving that. So we have these afflicted states of mind that come and go, and as I was saying, everyone sort of is a bit different, and it's interesting to identify, what is your most afflictive state of mind. I think mine at the moment is probably stress and anxiety, but other times in my life it's been other things that have bothered me predominantly. But it's interesting to think about what is the predominant, and you might have more than one sort of. Maybe it's like, sometimes anxiety and sometimes depression or whatever. So it's interesting. And the idea is that we focus mostly on that thing that's bothering us the most when we're doing these practices. So we start with that. That's like grist for our mill that we can work on. And then a useful term, as I mentioned before, is adventitious defilements. So the term adventitious means, firstly, that these things are impermanent. So we have things like anger, anxiety arising in our mind, but they don't stay forever. They come and they go. So that indicates that they're impermanent. They're not like the permanent nature of our mind. They come and go. And adventitious also means they're not in the nature of the mind. So like the idea with the clear sky, the clouds are not in the nature of the clear sky. They're just sort of passing through. So that's an important idea too, because I think we tend to think of how somehow being permanently afflicted by certain things, and that can cause us a lot of, depression, for example, where you feel like you have these negative qualities that you're stuck with. You're somehow, inherently problematic. So that's not true, according to the Buddha. They're just temporary. They'll come, but some of them seem very persistent, don't they? We even when you've been meditating for a long time and trying to overcome certain things, and they still arise. So it's important to remind ourselves that they are not of the nature of the mind. They just arise due to causes and conditions, and by identifying those causes and conditions, we can weaken them, make them weaker, less powerful, more manageable, and then eventually remove them, is the idea. Okay, so the last few weeks we've been talking about attachment and aversion, so examples of deceptive appearances. So with attachment, as I said, the deception with attachment is that something will appear to be, we sort of exaggerate the attractiveness or the beauty of that person or that object or whatever that is, and then we project that exaggerated appearance onto the object as though it were somehow existing within the object, and then we try to get hold of that attractive thing or person or object or whatever it is based on this attachment. So the idea is this is all something that's created by your mind and projected onto the object. Are you all right? Okay? Feel free to cough, it's all right. Don't worry. It's fine. So that's attachment. And then the flip side of attachment is aversion. So aversion is projecting exaggerated negative things onto an object, and like a person or whatever it is, in the same way with attachment, and then seeing those as existing from the side of the object. For example, when we get angry with someone, we're seeing the problem entirely, being with them. Feel free to disagree, but I think that's what happens when we're getting angry. We're seeing that they have this problem, this unpleasant characteristic or behaviour that's really bothering us, and we don't see that that's something we're projecting onto them by our mind. But then later on, when you calm down, you might realise actually that was kind of something I was projecting onto them. Or maybe if you misunderstood what they said, or you misunderstood their intentions, or they were actually joking, or you realize that you misunderstood the situation, then you realize that that was all projected by your mind onto that person. So that's examples of attachment and aversion. So this is the idea of these sort of deceptive appearances which are causing us problems. And the Buddha is saying there's quite a lot of this going on in our minds. So it's important that we're aware of it. And there's sort of like layers. There's more obvious deceptive appearances and more subtle. So the idea is you start with to sort of understand and identify the more obvious ones, like attachment and aversion. And then I think one that's maybe a little bit more subtle, I think, and something which attachment and aversion arise in dependence upon, is this idea of self-centeredness. So this is the idea, sometimes the term uses self-cherishing. I think I prefer the term self-centeredness because self-cherishing sounds like something positive that you would want to do. But in this context, self-centeredness is regarded as a problem. So self-centeredness, what we're talking about here is this idea that this I, this person, is the most important thing in the world, at least in my world. And so I think this is, I think when we first hear this idea that self-centeredness is a problem, that we might sort of feel that we're being judged harshly. It reminds me of when I was a child and my mother would tell me not to be selfish. You've got to share that last biscuit with your sister, and that was a real bummer. Like your mother telling you that, why can't I just eat it? And she won't even know that I had the last bit. So it reminds you of that feeling, the Buddha's saying, don't be selfish. But a more positive way to look at it is like a diagnosis. Like the Buddha is saying, this is something that you need to investigate because it's causing you a lot of problems, this self-centered attitude. So the Buddha's not saying, you're bad or you're naughty or, that you're doing something wrong. It's sort of like a physician diagnosing a problem. If you want to achieve the happiness that you desire, if you want to understand why you're having these various problems in your life, like relationship problems or these mental afflictions arising, then self-centeredness is something that you really need to investigate and see whether that is playing a part. So what are the deceptive appearances in regards to self-centeredness? So one of them, I think, is that we normally regard it as completely justified and sort of normal and rational to look after me being number one. And I think in a way it is, but some Buddhist texts point out, if you have yourself in one hand and all other beings in the other, because this one being yourself and all the other beings are countless, as in almost infinite, if you include non-humans like animals, etc. So just based on that alone, the infinite number of sentient beings are more important than this one. Okay, so and the Dalai Lama often makes the point: there's no logical reason why you should cherish this oneself to the exclusion of all others. It's not logical, it's not rational. But we tend to think that it is. We're sort of born with this innate feeling of got to look after number one, and we tend not to question the logic. But when you look at it that way, it's not very rational. It's like if you had a sea of or a huge field of flowers, and you just focused on one flower to the exclusion of all the others and said this is one special flower. So that's interesting and quite challenging idea, I think. Again, feel free to disagree. then this self-centered view is also deceptive because it appears as something that's helpful. So the idea here is that self-cherishing or self-centered mind appears to be some kind of innate self-preservation or self-protection that we have, instinct, that is helping us to achieve our happiness. But the Buddha is saying we should check that. Like, is that actually working for us? So, from a Buddhist point of view, we've been searching for happiness, or even, if you just for this life, you think about this life from the youngest age, you've been looking for happiness, trying to get happiness, and trying to avoid problems. So that's our main objective as sentient beings. So everything we do, we're trying to get more happiness, and we're trying to avoid, various problems. But even though that's been our main objective, even when we're asleep in our dreams, we're still experiencing various problems. So this, and this is sort of motivated by this self-centered view that looking after I, me, mine. Generally, we do also have, thoughts of kindness and generosity and care about people around us, but we also have this strong sort of instinct to look after this number one first. So Buddha's challenging that, saying, is that actually working for you? And then not recognizing all of the problems that arise from having this view is the other sort of deception. So you think about the various problems that you experience, in your daily life. Like I said before, you think about your biggest problem, like with me, for example, anxiety at the moment, particularly related to work and family and running this centre. How is that caused by self-cherishing? Like, the idea is that these kind of problems like anxiety and stress are arising because of self-cherishing. So if you think, for example, in the workplace, it's common to have stress and anxiety. Today I had an interesting experience where I was called into a meeting and told that my performance was not good enough. I'm too slow. So all my projects are too slow. So that was quite ego bashing. So why is that so stressful? Is because I have this idea of myself as, wanting to be, competent, intelligent, getting things done on time, being a good employee, being someone, because this is what I've been working hard to try to achieve, and then it doesn't, it fails like that, it's frustrating, and so you have to laugh, but it's sort of like, why is that so stressful? Is because this feeling of I want to be the successful one. But if it was happening to someone else, one of my colleagues, it would not be nearly as stressful. I'd probably think it's funny if they get hauled into a meeting and told that they're too slow. But it's not, when it's happening to someone else, it's not so stressful because it's not me, obviously. But so why is it so different? Because I have this investment in this I. I want this I to be the successful one, the one that gets things done on time and gets praised and gets regarded as competent, etc. And, the benefits that come from that. So you can see how, well, tell me whether you agree, that this is arising from a sense of I, wanting this I to be sort of like the winner in that situation, wanting to be successful, and I've invested strongly in promoting this I as a successful employee. So.
Can I just ask one?
Yeah, sure.
In saying that we're all searching for happiness.
Yeah.
Is that a different thing from being self-centered, trying to find happiness?
Yeah, good question. So I think it's comes down to think about our motivation. So why are we doing that? So I think generally our instinct is to look for happiness for this self. That's kind of like our natural impulse, isn't it? And to avoid anything that's unpleasant and sort of threatening or possibly harmful. And that's sort of based on a feeling of preserving this I. Okay. So I think, yeah, you'd say that this constant pursuit of happiness and trying to avoid problems is motivated by this sort of, generally by this self-centered view. Yeah. But this is regarded as a problem. And so why is it a problem? It's because it's somehow, in a way, sort of self-defeating. Because we have this sense of I as being sort of like the center of the universe, which is, well, it's unrealistic for a start, so I'm not actually the center of the universe. I'm not the most important thing in the universe. I'm very insignificant, in fact. So we have this view of ourselves as being the most important thing. The universe is not behaving, according to that that world view. It's got its own plans. So one Buddhist teacher says, what you're doing is you're creating this situation where there's I'm here, this precious me is here, and then there's this world out there that's separate from me. And so firstly, that's quite a lonely situation. There's me over here, and then there's this universe out there, all these other things. And then I'm trying to extract all the good things from this universe for this self, and I'm trying to protect it from all the bad things and push them away. But I have limited control over the universe, or the world around me, so I'm, not entirely successful in this, and it's quite stressful trying to control something that you don't actually have much control over. So we're sort of creating this problematic situation for ourselves. Like he said, if it's you against the universe, then who do you think is going to win? Like, it's sort of setting up this dynamic of me against the world. So that's the idea, that we're sort of creating this problematic situation or world view for ourselves that's inherently problematic. Yeah. So this is very innate, isn't it? We're talking about something that's very innate. So we're challenging our most basic assumptions, I think. And also in animals and insects, even like you put your hand in front of an ant, and the ant's thinking something is stopping me from going where I want to go. So the ant's having the same thought, I think. So other problems that arise from this self-centered mind. So an obvious example. Yes, sorry. Go on.
So I have a question. We are in a challenged mindset, for example, in anxiety. We have the tendency to be more self-centered because we look after ourselves. Because when we are challenged and when we stand with the back against the wall, sometimes we don't have much, we have less choices available, if this makes sense. So less choices available can come across as more self-centered. How can I distinguish between self-centered and self-care?
Yeah, very good question. And I think that's quite a challenge here with this practice, is to sort of clarify the difference between those two. So the sort of the harmful, the self-cherishing which is causing you harm, and the self-care which is sort of necessary. So I think the Buddha's not saying that we should stop caring for ourselves. So we still need to, look after our body, for example, our health, eat well and exercise, etc. And we also need to look after our mind, so try to avoid, thoughts which are disturbing our mind. The Dalai Lama often makes the point that if you really want to be selfish, the best way to practice selfishness, the intelligent way, is to care about all others. So the idea there is that by stopping this sort of obsessive focus on I, me, mine, and sort of expanding your view out to include other people, starting with the people around you, And firstly, just sort of being aware of them, and also being aware of how they're the same as you, in that they're also constantly trying to find happiness and to avoid problems. So just sort of opening your mind up to the people around you, which we do sometimes, but to sort of really work on that, make that a focus. And then also this idea of sort of giving yourself to them. So instead of just working for me and my project, I'm sort of trying to do this for everyone, trying to include everyone in this project. So for example, with the breath meditation, you think, oh, I'm just doing this because my mind is so stressed and I want to get some peace of mind for myself and just get through the day. And then you compare that to thinking, okay, I'm going to develop a peaceful state of mind so that I can be more useful to all the people around me. So you can see that's quite a different kind of approach or motivation. So that's the idea. So very important not to neglect yourself, but at the same time also identify how this kind of overly focusing on me is creating problems for us. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's many different meditation practices that you can try to deal with something like anxiety, and it's important to investigate different techniques, I think. One thing I find very useful is, which is similar to this idea, like today when I was feeling very stressed with this work situation, is you think about all the other people in the world who are having exactly the same experience, or worse, but particularly the ones, have experiencing work-related stress. You firstly just think about them, how they're experiencing exactly the same as I am. So that firstly stops you from feeling like, poor me, I'm the only one who's got this problem. You realise that there's many people who have the same problem, and also a lot worse, people in war zones, for example, or people with disease, etc. So there's that, and that immediately takes you out of this feeling of, me, it's my problem, it's so difficult, so painful, and that sort of expands your focus, I think. And then there's a practice where you imagine that this pain that you're experiencing is actually, you're taking it from them, which is sort of like you're taking it a step further. And that is, you're imagining that is destroying this sort of selfish attitude. It's a practice in Buddhist practice called Tonglen, giving and taking. So in that case, you're taking on their problems. So you could start with maybe someone who's close to you, like a loved one, like your child, for example, and you think taking on that problem from them, and that's what I'm experiencing. So this pain I'm experiencing is sort of like theirs, but I'm taking it from them. And by doing that, I'm destroying this self-cherishing or self-centered mind. So that's an interesting idea. A bit confronting, I think, but interesting to think about as a practice. Yeah, I think we have to be very, very gentle and, sorry? Yeah. So the whole thing, I think, certainly nothing wrong with caring for yourself, but the idea is to try and identify how the difference between, overly focusing on the self to the point where it becomes a problem, and it's actually the opposite of self-care, it's sort of self-harm, and seeing how focusing on others is a way of, as Dalai Lama says, the best kind of self-care. Interesting idea. Okay. So that's all about the how self-centered mind is deceptive in those ways, in that it's appearing to be rational when actually it's not really rational, and also appearing to be the best kind of self-care, but actually is quite problematic. Something to investigate. So then, if we recognize or decide that this self-centered mind is causing us problems, then what do we do about it? Let's say we want to reduce it and eventually overcome it. So I think the first step is, as we said before, is just to identify how it's causing problems for us. So you think about the various problems you're experiencing and ask yourself, how do these relate, or do these arise because of self-centeredness? So that's like a thought experiment we can conduct. So you think of a problem you had today, something unpleasant, irritation, anxiety, whatever it was, and ask, how is self-centeredness playing a role in giving rise to that state of mind? And then another practice is thinking about all the problems that are caused by this self-centered state of mind, and all the advantages of doing the opposite, which is focusing on the welfare of others. And the practice of compassion, love and compassion, so love meaning the wish that others be happy, and compassion meaning the wish that others be free of suffering. So that's a very central practice in Buddhism and in many spiritual traditions. One Buddhist teacher said all the enlightened beings of all the different religions got together and thought about it for thousands of years and decided that this is the best practice you can do, for making your mind peaceful in the short term and developing your spiritual, qualities in the long term. And that's the practice of love and compassion. So that's interesting. And the reason why that is regarded as so important is because it's the opposite to this self-centered state of mind, the one that's thinking of I, me, mine, and that's serving as a powerful cause for all the various problems that we're experiencing, relationship problems, psychological problems, even health problems, money problems. So that's why the practice of love and compassion is central in Buddhism and in many other traditions. That's one of the reasons. It's also central because it's beneficial to others to practice that. Okay, so that's quite a lot. Any more questions or comments about that? Does any of that sound crazy? Too hard? Often I think Buddhist practice is way too hard. Just rather watch TV. Yes, good point. Yeah, I agree. So what would be the difference between self-compassion and self-centeredness or self-cherishing, would you say? How would you explain that? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like, how would you know, whether you've got the sort of helpful self-compassion or the problematic self-cherishing, which is acting as a cause of problems? I wonder what would be the way of diagnosing which one is which. Yeah, like a feeling of. So I guess with self compassion, you're sort of seeing yourself as having value, as important, but in the same way as everyone else is important. Yeah. So not to the exclusion of them. Yeah. So in the same way as you have Buddha potential, or this divine seed. Everyone else has that as well. And the same way as you're experiencing problems, they're all... So just seeing as you're just an example of another sentient being. And it's also said to be useful because this is the person that you know the best, and on the basis of having that experience of your own experiencing these various problems and the difficulties of trying to achieve the happiness, so then it's easy to extrapolate to the people around you and see that they're exactly the same. So you're like the blueprint. Yeah. So that's empathy, I think you'd call that. So identifying how others are the same as you. Interesting. Okay. Any last thoughts? All right, we've got 3 minutes, so we'll do a quick compassion meditation. So just visualize from your heart light rays emanating out, firstly to all the people in this room, and feel that this light represents wisdom and compassion, some kind of energy, and it's filling the others, people in this room, with this sort of peace and happiness. It's also relieving them of problems that they're experiencing, anxiety or health problems or, relationship problems, work-related stress, whatever it is. So it's relieving them of that. And then you feel some kind of joy that they're experiencing this peace. So you focus on this feeling of joy. How nice it is that they're experiencing that peace, freedom or relief from that problem. And then you try to expand that same visualization out to include like all the people in this area, in this city, in this world, and not just the humans but also the animals. So this is just like an aspiration. So we're sort of familiarizing our minds with this feeling or this wish, or just with the thought of how nice it would be for others to feel peace and be free of problems. And then you can develop this further by thinking, I will do what I can to make that happen. So currently my ability to do that is fairly limited, but having the wish that I would like to be able to help others to achieve peace and happiness and be free of problems. So you just focus your mind on that feeling, on that sort of wish. And at the end of the meditation, you withdraw the light back into your heart, and you feel that all beings have achieved this lasting peace that they're looking for, including yourself. Okay, thank you. Short and sweet. So thanks everyone for listening. Just a couple of announcements. So one is that there's this Tara Tanka being displayed at the Melbourne Town Hall on the 3rd of May. 4-story high painting of Tara. There's also a meditation course on emptiness on the 30th of this month I think it's called Achieving Happiness Through Understanding Emptiness, which is a very interesting topic. Finding Happiness Through Understanding Emptiness, the 30th of March from 9 till 5. Okay, thanks very much. Please feel free to stay for tea if you would like to.